Have you ever had that feeling, the little voice in the back of your head, maybe whispering that you didn't really get away with something?
Hmm.
Maybe it was, I don't know, bending a small rule, taking a shortcut you thought nobody saw.
Yeah, or maybe something more public?
Exactly. Like that moment of public dissent, a strong opinion you shared, maybe a protest you went to, a chant you joined in with, and it just felt so, I don't know, fleeting, like it vanished right
Yeah,
after.
inconsequential.
What if it didn't? What if every single one of those moments, big or small, was actually uh, meticulously recorded, timestamped, indexed, stored away somewhere?
Creating this kind of invisible ledger of your life,
Mm.
a ledger that could be, well, pulled out and used against you whenever someone decides it's useful.
It's more than just a nagging feeling then, isn't it? It's a pretty unsettling thought, this idea that behaviors we think are minor, maybe even private, aren't just seen, but actively cataloged.
Yeah, as part of some huge unseen system.
And that's exactly the, well, fascinating and maybe, yeah, unsettling idea we're diving into today here on the Deep Dive.
Our source material actually calls this America's Invisible Shock Collar.
Right. And this isn't about, formal arrests, court dates, the kind of legal rap sheet we all know about. This is supposed to be something much more insidious.
A pervasive, unyielding system, collecting data, tracking, indexing what the source calls every antisocial behavior, every act of activism.
All designed specifically to be leveraged against you later,
Yeah.
against your credibility, maybe your future plans.
So our mission today is really to unpack this whole concept.
Yeah, we're going to explore how this system supposedly operates, look at its historical roots, which go back way further than you might think, actually.
And examine how everyday technology, the stuff in our homes and our pockets, plays a huge part.
And maybe the most surprising part, delving into why, according to these sources, we ourselves, as a society, might actually be playing a role in keeping it going.
Get ready for some real aha moments, potentially. Things that might make you see your daily life, your idea of freedom, quite differently.
Okay, so let's start by pulling back the curtain on what the sources are calling the invisible net. The sheer scope of this data collection is something else.
They paint a really stark picture. Basically, every protest attended, every sign waved, every chant shouted in public.
What they call every tiny flicker of so-called righteous dissent.
Right. All of it scraped, indexed, time-stamped, and then just stashed away in a personal file with your name on it.
And here's the crucial bit that's apparently happens, whether or not you were ever arrested or charged with anything.
Doesn't matter. The act of just expressing yourself in public, that's the data point they're collecting.
It's the sheer breadth of it that's, well, unsettling. It's not just focused on clearly illegal stuff.
No, the source really emphasizes that. It doesn't matter if you thought it was civil disobedience or, harmless street theater or just a bit of performative rebellion you forgot about 5 minutes later.
The public act itself gets logged. Think about that. Just being there, participating, voicing an opinion in public becomes part of some kind of permanent record you don't even know exists.
And it gets even deeper, doesn't it? It's supposedly cuts across political lines. The specific cause doesn't matter.
Yeah, the source uses these vivid examples, wearing a pussy hat or a balaclava, a MAGA hat or a rainbow flag.
Even just wearing a hoodie can apparently flag you.
And here's where it gets really interesting, showing how adaptive this system is meant to be. Wearing a mask now, post-COVID, might make you a target.
But not wearing one during the height of COVID also made you a target then.
Exactly. The technology, they argue, it just persists. It never switches off. It just waits for new rules, new definitions of who or what is a target.
It's almost like it's designed to catch you regardless of the choices you make within whatever the current social or political climate is.
That adaptability, it leads right into what the source calls the bait and tests analogy.
Right, this idea that lots of minor things you thought you got away with weren't missed at all. They were, in fact, bait or tests.
The system wasn't blind, it was watching, gauging how you react when faced with these societal temptations.
It really shifts how we think about accountability, doesn't it? Getting away with something might not mean what we think it means.
So it's not just the big, obvious stuff. The source gives these really provocative examples like every store you were allowed to loot, every petty act of vandalism you thought you got away with.
Or those times you felt like, the system shrugged and let you off with no bond, no trial. Maybe blaming it on, I don't know, a Soros DA on TV for being soft on crime.
Right. The implication being the system wasn't being lenient necessarily. It was just collecting data points about your behavior.
And this apparently goes down to even more common things that are technically illegal but often overlooked, like every cash register you hopped, every self-checkout you skated through.
The core message seems to be every time you thought, I'm too small, no one noticed, you were noticed.
The house, as they put it metaphorically, was taking notes. It really challenges that whole idea of getting away with it. Just because there wasn't an immediate consequence doesn't mean it wasn't recorded.
That mansion analogy they use really drives it home, thinking of America as this huge mansion, seemingly open.
And in this mansion, every unlocked door, every Rolex left out on a hallway table, every $100 bill sticking out of a purse, all these temptations.
According to the source, they were all bait, a test. Every time you maybe snuck something, bent a rule, and thought you got away clean.
The walls were watching, and crucially, the falls don't forget.
Which suggests this whole thing is designed systemically to watch and record how people respond to these tests, building up a profile of your behavior.
And this watching isn't just human eyes anymore, is it?
Not at all. The source claims that since 2020, the entire place has been rewired, with technology that makes Cold War surveillance look, as they say, quaint.
It's not just an upgrade. It sounds like a fundamental shift in the surveillance landscape.
Quaint is a strong word, but it really makes the point. Your Nest camera at home, your Ring doorbell, your grocery store loyalty card, the mic in your phone, your smart TV.
They're all, according to the source, part of the same perimeter now.
It's not separate surveillance points anymore. It's like this integrated, ubiquitous web. Our own devices have become extensions of this observation system.
And the data from all these devices, it doesn't just sit there. Everything you are gets atomized and recombined.
Then hoovered into data centers you'll never see.
Right. Governed by algorithms that, and this is pretty chilling, outlive any president.
Which means your behaviors, your preferences, all broken down, are constantly being analyzed, cross-referenced, ready to be used. It bypasses political cycles, human oversight. It sounds like a self-perpetuating machine.
So every time you think you're invisible, you push a boundary, you take a risk.
It's not just a fleeting moment that goes unobserved. The source suggests it's testing you, watching how you behave when you think you're getting away with something.
It's like a continuous invisible evaluation, building a profile of your tendencies, your willingness to break rules, how you act when you think you're free.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, it becomes clear, or at least the source argues, this isn't entirely new. This idea of tracking people for later leverage, it has deep historical roots, prototypes that existed long before our digital world.
Yeah, the source material goes into quite a bit of detail there.
What's really striking is the direct line they draw to someone like Martin Luther King Jr. decades before the internet.
The same basic principle was apparently applied to him. They didn't just arrest him for every act of dissent right then and there.
No, instead they tracked him. They meticulously collected, hoarded every affair, every rumor, every hotel room rendezvous. It was about creating a vulnerability.
And the purpose was very specific, very strategic, to blow up his credibility if he ever stepped too far out of line.
And the crucial detail the source adds is that the file wasn't burned. It was kept, ready to be pulled out if his family or his allies ever got too loud about the parts of his work the establishment didn't like.
It perfectly illustrates this long game, preemptive, almost oppressive kind of surveillance, focused on character, not necessarily crime.
Which ties right into what the source calls J. Edgar Hoover's infamous files. They explicitly label those the prototype shadow rap sheets.
And it wasn't just MLK Jr., it was Fred Hampton, labor organizers, people who were, as the source puts it, given enough rope to agitate, but always under a net of blackmail and leverage.
They had some freedom, but within this controlled space.
Exactly. If they threatened the core power structure too effectively, then bam, their affairs, bribes, mistakes, private humiliations would suddenly surface, leaked, published, weaponized.
That, the source says, was the historical version of the invisible fence buzzed. A soft control, but incredibly powerful, without needing a formal arrest. It was about managing public image, wielding leverage, not always about criminal conviction.
And this basic framework just kept evolving, expanding, especially during the Cold War and then massively after 9/11.
Yeah, the source brings up Echelon, that Cold War global signals intelligence program, run by the Five Eyes, US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
Right. Notorious for scooping up huge amounts of international phone calls, faxes, telexes back then. Even working on analog signals, its ambition for global surveillance really laid the groundwork.
Echelon was kind of groundbreaking, wasn't it? Not just the scale, but using early keyword spotting, automated processing to flag interesting communications.
Absolutely. It pushed boundaries technically and legally, caused huge international debates about privacy, debates that really echo today.
Then came PRISM, the post-911 system.
Okay.
According to the source, it plugged directly into the big U.S. tech firms Google, Microsoft, Yahoo.
They called it lawful interception, but the source is blunt. The data hoover was bottomless. That was a huge shift, right? From intercepting comms to getting direct access to user data held by private companies.
That plugging in with PRISM, that was the game changer. Moving beyond just intercepting calls to accessing stored data emails, chats, files directly from company servers, all under the banner of national security.
Yeah, the legal idea of lawful interception got stretched pretty thin to cover just unprecedented mass data collection. It really set the stage for the kind of surveillance we see now.
And if anyone thought maybe those programs were temporary measures.
Snowden. His revelations, as the source points out, showed the world the taps were never really turned off. It wasn't just a temporary thing. It was, and apparently still is, an ongoing, deeply embedded system, always gathering.
There's even a physical symbol of this ambition, that huge NSA data center in Utah, Bluffdale.
Right, built for billions, designed to hold billions of gigabytes of raw signals, everything that could be legally or quasi-legally grabbed. The scale itself speaks volumes about the permanence of this archival goal.
And for anyone still thinking, oh, but it's just metadata,
The source tackles that head-on, arguing metadata is the message.
they elaborate, right? Who you called, when, where you were, that's the outline of your life. It paints an incredibly detailed picture without needing the actual words you said.
That's such a crucial point. Think about it like a detective story. Often, it's not just what was said, but the context, who contacted whom, when, from where, how often.
Right.
Metadata gives you that entire blueprint.
Yeah.
Your relationships, your routines, your movements. The content almost becomes secondary for building a profile, for finding leverage. It lets the system build a powerful story about you without ever hearing a single word. It's the framework of your life.
Which brings us to this key idea about the system's long game. It's really about the archive, not just real-time watching.
Yeah, WikiLeaks, Assange, their leaks definitely cracked it open for a few years.
Yep.
Exposed cables, reports gave us a glimpse.
But, and this is important, the source emphasizes, nothing they revealed killed the system. It just made it shift deeper underground.
That's pretty sobering, actually. You'd think huge revelations like that would lead to dismantling or at least major pushback, but instead the system just adapted, got sneakier.
The source says the fence wants you to know it exists, just not all the details. Wow. Yeah.
To make you police yourself. If you know the fence is there, you police yourself. You train your own brain to stay inside the lines. It's psychological control as much as technical surveillance.
Behavioral conditioning on a massive scale.
Exactly. The source acknowledges that, yeah, maybe future tech like quantum computing or super advanced AI could allow for real-time psychographic analysis, like live profiling of thoughts and intentions. Scary stuff.
Yep.
But the real game is the archive. The power lies in the ability to freeze you in place 10 years from now for something you did when you thought the system had moved on.
So the data lasts forever. Its relevance never expires. That's the real source of its power, its leverage. Every click, every post, every location pinged today has this permanent shelf life ready to be used.
So with all this data collection, this history, what is this shadow rap sheet the sources are talking about? How is it defined? How is it different from a normal criminal record?
Well, the sources are really clear. It's a file you never see. It operates completely outside the regular justice system.
There's no court date. There's no bond hearing.
Right. No public record you can check. No due process for what's in it. It lives entirely in the shadows.
It's described as a ledger of every antisocial behavior you performed when you thought you were free.
And they give some really specific, almost visceral examples, don't they, to show just how broad this invisible file might be.
Yeah, things like every time you looted the convenience store, every time you did donuts at 3 a.m. in a city intersection.
Or even more disturbingly, every time you punched out your roommate or bullied someone on video or bragged about a sexual assault you figured would never come back.
Whoa. So these are actions that, even if they never led to a conviction in court, are still meticulously logged, time-stamped, stored, creating this permanent private record of your screw-ups.
That seems to be the argument. It's not about legal guilt or innocence. It's about a complete record of your unpunished actions.
And the contrast with old school rap sheets is critical here. Back in the day, maybe these things resulted in a police report. Visible, limited, local maybe, something that might eventually be expunged.
But this pseudo-rap sheet is called worse, exactly because it's invisible. It's soft leverage.
Soft leverage, meaning?
Meaning it doesn't immediately land you in legal trouble, but it doesn't expire either, like some records can. And maybe the most worrying part, it doesn't need a judge's okay to be kept, or, more importantly, to be used.
It just sits there, waiting. In some database, the public can't FOIA. Its persistence is key.
And its ultimate purpose. The source calls it not pre-crime, it's permanent crime insurance.
That's a really interesting phrase, permanent crime insurance.
Yeah, it's not about stopping a crime before it happens, like in sci-fi. It's about having something on you, just in case. The file waits for the day you have a mortgage, or a government job, or an office to run for, or an opinion worth silencing.
So it's about ensuring you always have this potential vulnerability, this sword of Damocles hanging over you, ready to drop if you ever become influential or inconvenient.
That's the idea. The moment you matter, the moment you threaten something bigger, that's when the pseudo-fence gets triggered and you learn the jolt all over again.
The chilling conclusion being, the collar is hidden, but you're wearing it all the same. It's not designed to jail you for small things, but to keep you within invisible lines, to keep your potential for rocking the boat in check.
Which leads us right into maybe the most striking metaphor the source uses, the invisible fence. Behavioral conditioning, using this shot collar idea, but on a national level.
Yeah, this part really brings the argument into sharp focus. The claim is the country doesn't need prison bars and iron fences to keep you in line anymore.
Instead, it's a shot collar and an invisible fence, exactly like you'd use for a dog or livestock. It's a shift from obvious physical control to something much more insidious, psychological.
Instead of ugly walls, they wire the boundaries into your head. Well, you, the individual, you test the boundaries. Maybe once, maybe twice. And when you feel that metaphorical jolt, the consequences of your recorded actions suddenly appearing, you learn exactly where the edge is.
And after that first sap,
the actual shock isn't even needed most of the time. You stay put out of habit. It becomes this ingrained, learned obedience, a self-limit based on fear of exposure.
And if you slip up, if you forget the boundaries,
they run the current through you again, just enough to remind you you're not the owner of the house. It's a really powerful and, dehumanizing analogy. You're the dog, trained by behavior, feedback, and the threat of exposure.
So it's not just punishment. It's about keeping you in this constant, subtle state of knowing your place. Your freedom is always conditional.
And the source is pretty insistent this isn't just, conspiracy nonsense. They call it livestock management and behavioral conditioning at a national scale, refined over decades through Pavlovian loops. It's presented as a calculated, systematic way to guide behavior without needing jackboots in the street.
So you get the illusion of freedom. You're told the First Amendment is sacred.
But the moment you actually act like you believe it, without sticking to some unwritten script, the system responds automatically. The file opens, the footage runs, the blackmail writes itself. An immediate, automated slap down to bring you back in line, remind you about the fence.
The source even dismisses the movie Enemy of the State as an antique now, a cartoon version of what's real.
Saying what once took entire CIA rooms full of people and gear now sits in your living room disguised as your smart speaker. The tech has become so normal, so integrated, often welcomed, that the line between convenience and constant monitoring is completely blurred.
And the final takeaway from this whole metaphor is pretty stark. The same conditioning that keeps a dog from running across the yard without a fence is the same invisible jolt that keeps you from taking your so-called rights too literally.
It's a profound statement about the real limits on our freedom, suggesting we're constrained not just by laws on the books, but by this unseen system of observation and potential leverage. It makes you ask, are you really free if every move might be recorded for later use?
Which brings us to maybe the most critical and definitely the most surprising question the source raises. Why? Why have we apparently built this system, tolerated it, maybe even helped perpetuate it?
The answer, according to the source, is not what you might think. It's not just some shadowy government agency wanting control.
No, the source says it's everyone. That might be the most shocking part of this whole thing. It implicates all of us.
How so?
The source claims the entire spectrum, from the new right to the blue-haired TikTok resistance, the red-capped populists, the campus radicals, the libertarian cosplayers. Every tribe wants the machine to serve their ends.
Wow. So the desire for this kind of system is universal across all these groups that seem to oppose each other. They all see it as a potential tool.
That's the argument. And what do they want to do with it? Not dismantle it. Nobody is really fighting to dismantle it. They're just fighting to sit in the control room.
So it's a fight for control over the system, not to get rid of the system itself, a battle for the steering wheel, not to junk the car.
The source makes this really bold comparison, saying America didn't just copy China's social credit system. We innovated a better version of it, one that makes its targets cheer for it while pretending they're still free.
That's a deeply unsettling thought, that we've perfected a kind of control that relies on public buy-in.
A model where people clap for mass data collection because they believe it's hunting the bad guys.
And here's the twist, the really insidious part, according to the source. Each side's bad guys are each other.
So the machine just feeds itself on your righteousness, your anger, your moral performances, and you tell yourself you're safe because you're on the right side.
And just to be absolutely clear here, we are reporting on the viewpoints in the source material. We're not endorsing any political side. We're just trying to understand the mechanism being described.
Absolutely. That neutrality is key, especially because the system itself is presented as being beyond any single political administration.
As the source says, this is not some relic of the Bush years or the Obama years or the Trump before Biden years. It is now. It's continuous, evolving, deeply embedded. It persists no matter who's in the White House.
And the source even specifically places this continuing under Trump's second act as the 47th president, the same man who was the 45th, arguing that even with a hypothetical landslide and supermajority, the surveillance apparatus, ICE, DHS, this memetic engineering complex they mentioned, hasn't been dismantled, it's been streamlined.
Which reinforces the idea that the system is self-perpetuating. It adapts to new political realities. It doesn't get torn down by them. It gets more efficient.
And that streamlining just reinforces the constant leverage. Every petty crime you think you got away with, every post you deleted, every mask you wore to hide your face during a protest or a riot or a prank, all of it is leverage now.
The data, once collected, no matter how old or seemingly irrelevant, stays usable in this shadow system.
It seems like there's this chilling principle at work. Nothing tested ever gets abandoned. Nothing that works ever gets decommissioned.
And the source also says that when the secret leaks, when a program gets exposed,
The machine doesn't get weaker. It just burrows deeper, outsourced to a skunkworks you'll never see, upgraded, made smoother. It doesn't vanish. It adapts, evolves, gets harder to see.
which leads to a really sobering conclusion the source draws. That's why there is no party of civil liberties anymore.
Because, the source argues, nobody wants the fence torn down. They just want to be the one with the shock button in their hand. A fundamental shift where controlling your opponents matters more than collective freedom, leading to this quiet acceptance of the invisible collar.
Wow. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today. Really peeled back the layers on this invisible shock collar, the shadow rap sheet.
Yeah, we've explored how this pervasive system of data collection, behavioral conditioning, and potential leverage supposedly tracks everything.
Yeah.
From Hoover's old files on activists
To the smart devices in our pockets right now, that this idea of a system that's always on, always building this comprehensive, permanent file on everyone.
And we learned it's not just some top-down thing. A big part of why it continues, according to the source, is this almost universal desire for control, leading different groups to actually cheer for surveillance, as long as it targets the other guys.
The source material leaves us with this really chilling final thought, something to chew on. If you think you're the protagonist in some rebellion story, you're not. You're a test subject, and the maze has no exit signs anymore.
The mansion, America, is rigged with bait, every room mapped, every trap sprung and logged. The file is always open, always being updated, ready to remind you who really owns the place and where you fit in.
So what does it actually mean for you, listening right now, to live in a world where, as the source puts it, a fence you can't see is always cheaper than a wall, and a file that never closes is the only prison you'll never dig your way out of?
Think about what that means for your daily choices, your online life, how you engage in public, your whole understanding of freedom in a world that's constantly, apparently, taking notes. What really stands out to you from everything we've discussed today, we definitely encourage you to reflect on that.